There's a strange thing that happens when you mention the Oscars and science fiction in the same sentence. Most people's eyes glaze over. The assumption is that the Academy has always kept sci-fi at arm's length, that prestige belongs to period dramas and tearful monologues, not spaceships and artificial intelligence. And honestly, that reputation isn't entirely wrong. The Academy has snubbed the genre more times than anyone can count. But here's what gets lost in that conversation. Some of the most decorated films in Oscar history are science fiction. Not just nominated, winning. Sweeping categories, setting records, walking away with armfuls of statuettes while critics barely mentioned it the next morning. The wins happened. They were just quietly filed away under technical awards, or overshadowed by the Best Picture drama. And over time, people simply forgot. This video is about those forgotten wins. 12 sci-fi films that collected more Oscars than almost anyone remembers, and the wild, behind-the-scenes stories that make each win more interesting than the trophies themselves. If you're new here, hit subscribe and drop a like. There's a lot more where this is coming from. I'm Bob, this is Sci-Fi Graveyard. Let's get into it. Number 12. The Matrix, 1999. When The Matrix arrived in March of 1999, nobody at Warner Brothers fully understood what they had greenlit. The Wachowskis had pitched it using comic book panels, a filmed proof of concept, and a level of technical ambition that the studio found either visionary or delusional, depending on who you asked. What followed was a production so experimental that entire filmmaking techniques had to be invented from scratch just to realize what was on the page. The result was 4 Oscar wins: film editing, best sound editing, and best visual effects. And every single one was deserved in a way that went far beyond spectacle. The visual effects win is the one people vaguely remember, mostly because of bullet time. But the story behind that effect is almost more impressive than the effect itself. Supervisor John Gaeta and his team built a rig of 120 still cameras arranged in precise arcs around the actors, each firing in rapid sequence. The resulting images were stitched together computationally to create the illusion of a moving camera around a frozen subject. Nothing like it had been attempted at feature film scale. The team spent months reverse engineering the physics of how light would behave in that freeze frame moment, down to the way fabric would catch air mid-motion. The Academy wasn't just rewarding the visual result. They were rewarding the invention of an entirely new language for action cinema. The film editing win tends to get forgotten, which is strange because it might be the most technically sophisticated aspect of the whole film. Editor Zach Stanberg was working with footage that didn't follow any conventional cinematic grammar. The freeze frame sequences, the slow-motion bullet dodges, the shifts between green-tinted simulated world footage and the desaturated reality of Zion. All of it had to be assembled in a way that felt coherent rather than chaotic. Stanberg built a rhythmic logic into the action sequences that influenced editors for the next 15 years. You can trace a direct line from his work here to how virtually every major action franchise now cuts its set pieces. What most people don't know is how close none of this came to existing. Halfway through pre-production, with the budget climbing and the schedule still unresolved, Warner Brothers executives began pushing to shut it down. The Wachowskis responded by screening their proof-of-concept footage alongside a precise breakdown of how each scene would be executed. The executives left either convinced or too confused to object. The sound and sound editing wins are the quiet legacy. Sound designer Dane Davis built every effect from scratch, refusing stock sounds for anything in the film. 4 wins. Every category entered, taken home. And somehow, 25 years later, it's remembered more as a visual spectacle than one of the most thoroughly decorated films of its decade. The next entry won nearly twice as many awards, and most people couldn't name a single one. Number 11. Gravity, 2013. 7 Oscars. To put that number in context, The Godfather won 3. Goodfellas won 1. Gravity, a film about a woman floating alone in space, won 7 Academy Awards, including Best Director. And the conversation around it now is almost entirely about the 2 it didn't win. Alfonso Cuarón took Best Director, making him only the 2nd Latino filmmaker to win the category and the 1st to win it for a science fiction film. He also won Best Film Editing, the first time in Oscar history that the same person won both, alongside Best Cinematography, Best Original Score, Best Visual Effects, Best Sound Mixing, and Best Sound Editing. 7 from 10 nominations. A hit rate very few films in any genre have achieved. The production behind those wins is one of the more punishing stories in modern Hollywood. Cuarón spent 4.5 years developing the film before a single camera roll. The core problem was fundamental. How do you shoot weightlessness convincingly when every existing technique, wire rigs, underwater photography, Vomit comet planes either looked fake or couldn't be controlled precisely enough to capture real performances. The solution was a 9-foot LED light box. Sandra Bullock and George Clooney were suspended inside it in harnesses, surrounded on all sides by 4,096 LED panels that could reproduce any lighting environment in space with complete accuracy. A robotic arm moved the camera around them with millimeter precision. Rather than actors moving through a set, the light moved around the actors. The result looked like documentary footage from an actual orbital disaster. Bullock trained for months in a harness rig and lost 15 pounds over the course of production, physically simulating the muscular atrophy that a real astronaut would experience. Many of her scenes were shot in near total isolation, reacting to nothing, with every surrounding element added in post. Emmanuel Lubezki's cinematography win was his first Oscar. The film's opening sequence, a 17-minute continuous take, is technically a composite of hundreds of elements assembled to look seamless. Lubezki and Cuarón mapped every shift of light across that sequence down to individual seconds, accounting for how sunlight would change as the shuttle's orbital position moved. The film came within a fraction of winning Best Picture, losing to 12 Years a Slave, but the closeness of that race says something significant. The Academy received it not as a genre exercise, but as genuine cinema. 7 awards. One of the most technically ambitious productions in Hollywood history. Remembered mostly as that Sandra Bullock space movie, the next entry's wins were even more unlikely, built on a score that almost didn't get submitted in time. Number 10. Star Wars: A New Hope, 1977. In the spring of 1977, 20th Century Fox released a science fiction film they were so uncertain about that they only booked it into 32 theaters. Several major chains had refused to carry it. The studio's own marketing team wasn't sure how to sell it. When it opened on May 25th and lines stretched around the block at every single venue, Fox scrambled to print more copies fast enough to meet demand. By Oscar night the following April, Star Wars: A New Hope had collected 6 Academy Awards, plus a 7th Special Achievement Award, a custom category created specifically because the Academy couldn't determine which existing technical award covered what the film had accomplished. The 6 competitive wins were Best Art Direction, Best Costume Design, Best Sound, Best Film Editing, Best Original Score, and Best Visual Effects. The Special Achievement Award went to sound designer Ben Burt and creature supervisor Stuart Freeborn for the alien characters, work that had never been attempted at that scale in Hollywood. John Williams' original score win is the one most people know. What's less discussed is how close it came to not being submitted at all. Williams was working on 3 separate projects simultaneously during post-production, and there was genuine anxiety about whether the score would be completed and registered in time for award consideration. If the timing had slipped by a few weeks, the ceremony would have looked very different. The visual effects win required building an entirely new company. Lucas, frustrated that no existing effects house had the capacity to produce what the film needed, founded Industrial Light and Magic specifically for this production. The staff was largely young artists who had never worked on a feature film. They built camera systems controlled by computer, a first in the industry, allowing the precise motion control photography that made the space battle sequences feel real. ILM would go on to define visual effects for the next 4 decades. It started here. The production itself was a disaster for most of its duration. Dozens of crew members quit during the Tunisia shoot. Harrison Ford famously refused to memorize large portions of his dialogue, claiming it didn't sound human. The robots broke constantly. The film editing win went to Paul Hirsch, Marcia Lucas, and Richard Chew. Marcia Lucas, George's wife at the time, reportedly saved the film in the editing room. Early cuts were so tonally confused that preview audiences were disengaged. Her restructuring of the Death Star attack sequence created the breathless pacing the film is now famous for. She won an Oscar for it. The marriage ended in 1983. 6 Oscars, a special award, an entirely new effects company. The next entry proved, 4 decades later, that the Academy still hadn't seen everything this genre could do. Number 9. Dune Part 1, 2021. Denis Villeneuve had been trying to get Dune made for years before Legendary Pictures finally agreed to finance it. The book had been declared unfilmable after David Lynch's troubled 1984 adaptation, and conventional Hollywood wisdom held that the source material, 800 pages of desert ecology, political dynasties, and interstellar religion, was too dense and too expensive to translate to screen. Villeneuve spent years building a case that it wasn't. When nominations came in for the 2021 Oscar ceremony, Dune Part 1 received 10, the most of any film that year. It won 6, also the highest total of any film that year. Best Cinematography, Best Film Editing, Best Production Design, Best Costume Design, Best Sound, and Best Original Score. 6 wins from 10 nominations is a conversion rate only 1 or 2 films per decade ever manage. The sound win is arguably the most technically significant. Villeneuve and his sound team committed early to building an entirely new sonic vocabulary, one that felt genuinely alien rather than drawing on any existing sci-fi tradition. Hans Zimmer, who had turned down scoring Christopher Nolan's Tenet specifically to take this project, hired vocalists from Bulgaria, Mongolia, and West Africa to record timbres that had never appeared in a film score. He also invented new instruments, including a device producing infrasonic frequencies below the threshold of human hearing, frequencies that would be felt in a theater rather than consciously registered. The Academy's sound branch recognized it as a technical achievement, not just a compositional one. Greg Fraser's cinematography win reflected Villeneuve's insistence on practical locations: Jordan, Abu Dhabi, Norway, Budapest, rather than digital environments. Fraser had to photograph real desert landscapes at a scale that matched the narrative's epic weight, while accommodating massive mechanical sets built on location. The result was a film where even the most fantastical sequences have a geographical, tactile reality that pure CGI cannot replicate. The production design and costume design wins carried the same philosophy. Patrice Vermette's sets drew on real architectural traditions, Middle Eastern, Byzantine, African, rather than a purely invented visual language. Jacqueline West's costumes were constructed from fabrics sourced from artisans across multiple countries. The Fremen still suits were fully functional. They moved correctly because they were built correctly. Villeneuve reportedly wept during the ceremony. He had fought for this project for the better part of a decade. 6 wins were an institutional acknowledgement that the film wasn't just technically impressive, it was a genuine artistic achievement. The next film won 4 Oscars, with a commitment to practical filmmaking so extreme that the director built a rotating hallway for $1 million, rather than render it on a computer. Number 8. Inception, 2010. Christopher Nolan made Inception on a commitment from Warner Brothers he had earned by delivering The Dark Knight. The studio gave him $160 million, minimal oversight, and almost no notes. An arrangement essentially unheard of in contemporary Hollywood for a project that wasn't a sequel or existing IP. What he did with that trust was build a film so technically complex that the crew frequently didn't understand what they were shooting until they saw it assembled. Inception won 4 Oscars: Best Cinematography, Best Visual Effects, Best Sound Mixing, and Best Sound Editing. It was nominated for 8 total, including Best Picture, and lost that final award to The King's Speech, in what became one of the most debated Oscar decisions of the entire decade. The visual effects win is the most discussed, but the story behind it complicates what visual effects even means here. Nolan's commitment to practical filmmaking is nearly ideological. For Inception, this produced extraordinary decisions. The rotating hallway fight, in which Joseph Gordon-Levitt battles guards through a corridor spinning 360 degrees, was built on a real set. The entire hallway, roughly 100 feet long, was constructed inside a functioning gimbal. Gordon-Levitt and the stunt performers trained for weeks to execute the choreography, and the sequence took 3 weeks to film on a set that cost around $1 million to construct. The Oscar went to an effect that was primarily physical. The Paris folding sequence, where streets bend upward and buildings rotate into the sky, is more layered. Most viewers assume it was entirely computer-generated. Parts were, but the foundation was forced perspective, miniature photography, and in-camera optical techniques reverse-engineered from classic Hollywood methods. The digital work was layered over practical photography, not used as a substitute for it. Wally Pfister's cinematography win was his 4th nomination and first victory. Nolan had insisted on shooting significant portions on large-format film rather than digital, a choice that added cost and complexity, but contributed directly to the textural weight that distinguishes how the film actually looks. Richard King's sound design introduced the film's defining sonic signature, the deep brass BRAM that became ubiquitous in action trailers for the following decade. King and Zimmer designed it to slow down as the dreamscape deepened, a detail most viewers absorbed emotionally without noticing consciously. 4 wins, a Best Picture nomination, a loss still relitigated in film criticism circles years later. The next entry had a very different kind of Oscar story, one that started with a puppet, ended with John Williams beating himself, and made the entire world cry over something built from rubber. Number 7. E.T. the Extraterrestrial, 1982. When Steven Spielberg made E.T., CGI as a mature filmmaking tool didn't exist. The alien at the center of the film, arguably one of the most emotionally resonant characters in cinema history, was a puppet. Several puppets, actually, plus a costume worn by a 12-year-old girl named Tamara Detroux. The mechanical creations were built by Carlo Rambaldi, who had already won 2 Oscars for creature work on Alien and the original King Kong remake. For E.T., Rambaldi constructed a radio-controlled head capable of more than 150 independent facial movements, each operated by a separate technician off-camera. That craftsmanship earned E.T. the Visual Effects Oscar, one of 4 the film won at the 1983 ceremony, alongside Best Original Score, Best Sound, and Best Sound Editing. The sound wins reflected the film's unusually precise approach to emotional architecture. Sound designer Charles L. Campbell built E.T.'s voice from a composite that included a sea otter, a raccoon, a professional burp artist, and actress Deborah Winger's speaking voice at its lowest register. The goal was something organic, warm, and slightly unplaceable, recognizably communicative without mapping onto any known animal or human sound. The result became one of the most immediately recognizable sonic signatures in film history. John Williams' original score win is among his most discussed. He was nominated 3 times at the same ceremony, for E.T., for Poltergeist, and for the theme to Raiders of the Lost Ark, which remains one of the stranger competitive situations the Academy has ever produced. He beat himself twice. What's remarkable about the E.T. score is its structural sophistication beneath its apparent simplicity. Williams wrote the closing bicycle chase, nearly 10 minutes of continuous action, as a concert piece first, then worked with Spielberg to cut the picture to the music rather than composing to the edit. It's a nearly unique arrangement in Hollywood, and it's why that sequence has a symphonic inevitability that most action climaxes don't. The Academy recognized it as a compositional achievement rather than a functional one. The film's Best Picture nomination placed it in one of the most competitive fields of the decade, ultimately losing to Gandhi, but its presence in that conversation reflects something the film's legacy sometimes obscures. E.T. was not received as a children's movie when it was released. It was received as a film. 4 Oscars, a Best Picture nomination, a puppet that made the world cry. The next film had an equally unlikely emotional core, except the thing audiences felt something for was made of liquid metal and cost $102 million to put on screen. Number 6. Terminator 2: Judgment Day, 1991. James Cameron made The Terminator in 1984 for approximately $6.4 million. 7 years later, he returned with its sequel at a cost of $102 million, the first film in history to carry a 9-figure budget. Most of Hollywood thought he had lost his mind. The film won 4 Oscars, grossed over $500 million worldwide, and changed the economics and technical standards of blockbuster filmmaking in ways the industry is still living with. The 4 wins were Best Sound Editing, Best Visual Effects, and Best Makeup, a combination that captures the film's defining ambition: to create something that had never been seen, at a level of technical execution that would hold up under the closest scrutiny. The visual effects win was built around the T-1000, the liquid metal antagonist played by Robert Patrick. Industrial Light and Magic spent approximately 2 years and involved 35 team members developing computer-generated imagery that could simulate liquid metal in motion with photorealistic accuracy. At that point, CG characters had never been convincingly integrated into live-action footage at that level of complexity. The pipeline ILM developed, morphing between physical stunt work, practical effects, and digital compositing, established the production model that every major VFX film of the 1990s subsequently adopted. What most viewers don't realize is that the T-1000's fully digital screen time is actually quite brief. Less than a minute of completely rendered CG exists in the film. The majority of the effect was achieved through practical methods, reflective silver makeup, careful editing, and camera techniques that created the impression of liquidity without requiring digital rendering. The Oscar acknowledged that synthesis of methods as much as the digital work itself. The makeup win surprises most people. The Academy honored the prosthetic work on Arnold Schwarzenegger's battle-damaged Terminator in the film's final act, the partially stripped face revealing the mechanical endoskeleton beneath. Stan Winston's team built a full-scale animatronic Schwarzenegger puppet for the most extreme damage sequences, detailed down to individual hydraulic lines. Sound designer Gary Rydstrom built the film's audio architecture around its central mechanical organic contrast. The T-800's footsteps were sourced from real industrial machinery. The T-1000's movement produced sounds Rydstrom described as simultaneously wet and metallic, achieved by recording specific liquids poured through metal containers at varying temperatures. 4 Oscars. The first $100 million film, a VFX pipeline that defined the following decade. What the next entry accomplished was arguably just as significant. With a fraction of the budget, a crew in open revolt, and a power loader suit that weighed 200 pounds. Number 5. Aliens, 1986. The original Alien had been a precise, claustrophobic horror film. When James Cameron was handed the sequel, he turned it into a war movie, tripled the scope, and somehow earned 7 Academy Award nominations, winning 2 under circumstances that most film historians now consider a significant undercount of what the production actually achieved. The 2 wins were Best Visual Effects and Best Sound Editing. Both were legitimate. Neither fully captured what the crew had built. Cameron was working with a budget that Fox had been actively trying to reduce throughout pre-production. The production relocated to Pinewood Studios in England, partly for cost reasons, and partly for the large format stage space the film required. Cameron had never directed outside the United States. Much of the British crew was openly skeptical of his approach, and the shoot became one of the more legendarily contentious productions of the decade. Cameron eventually had large portions of the crew replaced. Visual effects supervisor Robert Skotak built the film's environments almost entirely as miniatures and practical constructions. The landing bay where the Colonial Marines arrive on LV-426 was a physical model approximately 18 feet long, constructed with enough detail that it photographed as a full-scale installation. The dropship and APC were large-scale practical builds. Almost nothing in the film's exterior sequences was a real location. It was all designed, engineered, and built, either on the Pinewood stages or as precision miniatures filmed with motion control cameras. The sound design is one of the franchise's most underappreciated technical achievements. Sound designer Don Sharp built the alien vocalizations from a combination of large reptiles, oysters, and wet leather, processed through custom equipment to produce something that felt organic but recognizably non-terrestrial. The Colonial Marines' equipment sounds were sourced from real military hardware wherever possible, giving the film a tactical weight that made the alien threat feel more viscerally dangerous by contrast. Sigourney Weaver's operation of the power loader in the climax is usually reduced to trivia. The suit weighed approximately 200 pounds and required simultaneous radio controls and physical manipulation. Weaver performed the majority of the physical work herself over multiple shooting days, a detail that gets lost in the broader conversation about the sequence. 2 Oscars, 7 nominations, a production that nearly collapsed multiple times. What the next film achieved was Stranger, a director who had spent 14 years preparing for a single moment, and an Academy that handed him 3 awards while giving the night's biggest prize to his ex-wife. Number 4. Avatar, 2009. James Cameron spent 14 years making Avatar. That number sounds like an exaggeration until you trace the actual timeline. He wrote the original treatment in 1994, shelved it because the required technology didn't exist, and spent the intervening years working with camera engineers, software developers, and VFX researchers to build a production infrastructure that could realize his vision. By the time main photography began in 2007, Cameron had co-invented several pieces of equipment that had never existed before. The film won 3 Oscars: Best Cinematography, Best Art Direction, and Best Visual Effects. It was nominated for 9 total, including Best Picture and Best Director, and lost both to The Hurt Locker, directed by Catherine Bigelow, who also happens to be Cameron's ex-wife. The competitive dynamic was widely noted. The cinematography win was for Mauro Fiore, but the camera system he used was something Cameron had developed with Vince Pace specifically for this production. The Fusion camera system allowed stereoscopic 3D photography at a quality level that had never been achieved in a feature. More significantly, Cameron developed what he called the virtual camera, a handheld device that could display fully rendered CG environments in real time on set, allowing him to compose shots and direct performances in the digital world exactly as he would on a practical set. Cameron could move through Pandora while shooting it. The art direction win honored Rick Carter and Robert Stromberg's work building the world itself, a task that went far beyond production design. Cameron commissioned linguist Paul Frommer to construct Na'vi as a fully functional language with its own phonology and grammar. He brought in biologists and botanists to develop Pandora's ecology, the bioluminescence, the neural network of the home tree, the behavior of the wildlife, as internally consistent systems rather than decorative choices. The world existed on paper before it was filmed. The visual effects win was almost predetermined. The performance capture pipeline developed by ILM and Weta had never operated at that scale or fidelity. The Na'vi characters were captured at a detail level that allowed individual muscle movement and skin translucency to be reproduced digitally without visible artificiality. 3 wins. 14 years of development, the highest-grossing film in history at the time of its release. And still, the dominant narrative settled on it as the film that lost the awards that mattered. The next entry offers a completely different version of that story. A film the Academy recognized in almost every technical category, built by a director who had quietly been developing it for 20 years. Number 3. The Shape of Water, 2017. The Shape of Water is almost never discussed as a science fiction film. The marketing positioned it as a fantasy romance. Critics focused on its fairy tale aesthetics and Cold War allegory. Guillermo del Toro himself tends to describe it through the lens of classic monster movies. But the film is structurally a science fiction story. A classified government facility, a biological specimen of unknown origin, and the institutional machinery of a superpower attempting to weaponize something it can't understand. It won 4 Oscars: Best Picture, Best Director, Best Original Score, and Best Production Design. Made for approximately $19.5 million, it ranks among the least expensive Best Picture winners in Oscar history. Del Toro had been developing the concept for 20 years. The original kernel was simple, a version of the Black Lagoon story told from the creature's perspective. But it expanded in his mind across decades, acquiring its Cold War setting, its ensemble of marginalized protagonists, and its specific visual language long before a screenplay existed. When he finally secured financing through Fox Searchlight, much of the film already existed in detailed form in his head, and the production moved faster than most projects of comparable ambition. Paul Denham Osterberry's production design honored his recreation of a 1962 Baltimore, built entirely around aquatic imagery, teal and amber color grading, tile and glass surfaces, water present or implied in virtually every frame. The government laboratory felt like an aquarium from the inside. Del Toro has described the entire film as taking place beneath the water, aesthetically. Even in scenes where no water is visible, every set was designed to sustain that sensation. Alexandre Desplat's original score win was his second Academy Award. He drew on classic Hollywood musical styles, particularly Bernard Herrmann, and the lush, orchestral language of 1950s and 60s cinema, while layering in jazz and French chanson to produce something that feels like a memory of cinema rather than an instance of it. The emotional effect is specific, nostalgic and melancholic simultaneously, in a way that perfectly mirrors the film's own relationship to the genres it's drawing from. Del Toro's Best Director win was one of the more emotionally received moments of that ceremony. He had been working in Hollywood for over 2 decades, celebrated critically, but consistently overlooked by the Academy. That changed here. 4 wins. Best Picture, a $19.5 million budget that outperformed films costing 10 times as much. The next film on this list achieved its single Oscar in a category the Academy had to invent specifically to acknowledge what it had done, because nothing in the existing framework was adequate. Number 2. 2001. A Space Odyssey, 1968. Stanley Kubrick made 2001: A Space Odyssey at a time when the prevailing model for science fiction cinema was cheap sets, rubber costumes, and scripts that treated scientific plausibility as optional. What he produced instead was a film so technically advanced that the Academy had to create a new category to acknowledge it, a special visual effects award, designated apart from the competitive field because the existing criteria were insufficient to evaluate what Douglas Trumbull and his team had built. 1 Oscar. But the category was essentially invented for this film, and the implication was clear. This was a different order of achievement than anything else in the room. The production took 4 years from initial development to release. Kubrick's methodical approach pushed that timeline to extremes that strained MGM's patience considerably. When the studio screened an early cut, senior executives were reportedly alarmed by its pace, its extended silences, and its refusal to explain itself in conventional narrative terms. MGM seriously considered cutting up to 17 minutes without Kubrick's involvement. He was informed of this plan and reportedly threatened legal action. The film was released with his cut intact. Critical reception at release was poor. Renata Adler's review in the New York Times was withering. Pauline Kael called it a monumentally unimaginative movie. Roger Ebert gave it 3 stars, a review he would spend much of the rest of his career publicly reconsidering. The film's initial audience was largely young and counterculture adjacent, responding to its visual and sonic immersion in ways that baffled most traditional reviewers. The effects work behind the Oscar was a sequence of inventions, each developed because no existing method was adequate. The slit-scan photography technique used for the Stargate sequence was created by Douglas Trumbull specifically for this film, a process involving a camera moving at precise incremental speeds past a backlit aperture, producing the infinite corridor light tunnel effect. Front projection. Projecting background imagery onto a reflective screen behind performers was used for the Dawn of Man sequences, achieving location-quality photography on a stage. Both techniques were subsequently adopted across the industry. Kubrick received no competitive directing nomination, no producing nomination, 4 total nominations, 1 win, in a category the Academy created partly because it couldn't place the film anywhere else. It is now routinely cited as the most important science fiction film ever made, and one of the most significant in any genre. The next film offers a different kind of institutional reckoning. A cinematographer who waited 14 years for an Academy that finally ran out of reasons to say no. Number 1. Blade Runner 2049, 2017. Roger Deakins had been nominated for an Academy Award 14 times before Blade Runner 2049. 14 nominations. Across a career that included Fargo, No Country for Old Men, Skyfall, True Grit, The Shawshank Redemption, and Sicario, the most respected cinematographer of his generation had returned home empty-handed at every ceremony. The film community had developed a genuine sympathy, a sustained collective frustration on his behalf that turned into sustained applause when he finally won. The film also won Best Visual Effects, bringing its total to 2 Oscars, but they carry the weight of a much longer story. The cinematography win was really an acknowledgement of a body of work finally receiving its overdue formal recognition through a single film. Deakins and Denis Villeneuve made an early, absolute decision that the sequel would not replicate the visual language of Ridley Scott's original. No neon rain, no crowded vertical city, no perpetual darkness. Instead, they built a color-coded visual system where each environment had a distinct chromatic identity: the amber wasteland outside Los Angeles, the bleached pink of the Las Vegas ruins, the cold gray-blue of the LAPD headquarters. Moving between these environments created a sensory experience built entirely through light and color, rather than production design alone. The degree to which the production avoided digital environments is remarkable. Villeneuve commissioned full-scale set construction for virtually every interior, and for many exterior sequences as well. The orphanage scenes were filmed in an actual industrial facility. The farm sequences were built on location. The cityscapes used a combination of large practical sets, hand-executed matte paintings, and digital extensions. But the foundational photography was always a real, tangible thing Deakins was responding to. The visual effects win came partly on the strength of one specific sequence: the digital recreation of Harrison Ford's 1982 face applied to a body double for scenes where a younger Deckard appears on screen. The technique had been used before, but never with that degree of seamlessness in a sustained sequence. It set the technical standard for digital de-aging that the industry has since applied across dozens of major productions. The film lost money. Its production and marketing costs were not recovered at the box office, and it remains one of the more significant commercial disappointments of its era. It is also, nearly universally now, considered one of the greatest sequels ever made, a film that deepens its source material rather than exploiting it. 2 Oscars, 14 years of waiting, a sequel that outclassed its predecessor. That arc, overlooked at the box office, eventually vindicated, is, in many ways, the arc of science fiction at the Oscars more broadly, and it's exactly why this list exists. Here's what connects every film on this list. They changed something. Not just in terms of entertainment, or box office, or franchise potential. They each changed what was technically possible, what cinema was allowed to look like, what stories it was permitted to tell seriously. And the Oscars, for all their blind spots and biases and political machinery, found ways to acknowledge that, even when the acknowledgement came in categories that don't get broadcast in primetime, or in special awards invented because the existing framework couldn't contain what had been achieved. The genre doesn't need the Academy's validation. 2001 didn't need a competitive directing nomination to become the most important science fiction film ever made. Blade Runner 2049 didn't need to recoup its budget to earn its reputation. But the wins matter as a record, a technical and artistic ledger showing that the people who actually make films understood what was being accomplished, even when critics and audiences filed it away under spectacle. The next time someone tells you the Oscars ignore science fiction, you have 12 counterarguments, and the films behind them are worth revisiting. Not just for the awards, but for the work. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next.